Later, Jun approached his father on the sofa and apologized. His father smiled and said he wasn't angry, only surprised. Then he asked what Jun wanted to do now. Jun opened his eyes wide and said he would do whatever he wanted. His father blinked in surprise and asked what that was. Jun looked up at him calmly and said he wanted to become the president of a company even bigger than his grandfather. His father burst out laughing. Jun didn't understand what was so funny. Saying Group was the #1 company in Korea. His father smiled kindly and said Jun dreamed big. Jun replied that this was why he needed his dad's help. His father adjusted his glasses and said he didn't think he could help much. He had studied business in England, but his true passion had always been cinema. Jun's eyes lit up. That was exactly what he needed. He asked if his father still had contacts from his time studying in England. His father stared at him in shock and slowly folded his hands, studying his son carefully. Elsewhere, the Sayang Group building glowed in the sunset. Yonan clenched his teeth in frustration after hearing that Jun had received 14 billion won as land compensation, with another 10 billion coming later. Even if Jun simply put the money in the bank, the interest alone would be enormous. Apartments, rental income, endless possibilities. Yonan shouted that it wasn't the point. His grandfather was a man who never gave away even a single one without reason, yet he had handed Jun a ranch, land, and full control over the money. That alone said everything. Compared to that, Yonan realized how little he himself was valued. Back at Jun's house, the evening sky glowed pink. His father opened the door to greet an old friend from England. Jun widened his eyes in shock as the man introduced himself. Shawn, chairman of PowerShares Korea. Jun froze. In the future, this company would grow into a financial monster, managing hundreds of trillions of won. To Jun, it was like meeting the Warren Buffett of Korea before the world realized who he was. Shawn asked if he could speak to Jun alone. His father smiled and encouraged Jun to listen carefully. Shawn placed his briefcase against the wall and sat down, folding his hands calmly. He said he heard Jun wanted to become a businessman. Jun nodded without hesitation. Shawn asked if Jun wanted to follow in his grandfather's footsteps. Jun replied that he wanted something even bigger. Shawn smiled and said Sayang was already the largest company in Korea. Wanting more sounded greedy. Jun smiled and said it wasn't greed, it was a dream. Shawn laughed, saying Jun had inherited his grandfather's hunger and his father's imagination. Jun asked if Shawn himself ran a big company. Shawn nodded, explaining that his business was different. His job was to make rich people even richer. Jun's eyes widened. He asked if Shawn dealt with people who had a lot of money. Shawn confirmed it. Jun then asked if Shawn could increase his money too. Shawn laughed, then shook his head. He explained that all his clients were already wealthy adults. Jun asked if his father hadn't told him about his money. Confused, Shawn listened as Jun explained he had 14 billion won now, with another 10 billion coming soon. Shawn froze. 14 billion. Jun casually handed him a notebook and said it was an investment plan he had created. Shawn slowly flipped through the pages. His expression changed. Sweat formed on his brow as he read projections, stock strategies, and long-term investment structures. Jun sipped his drink calmly, watching Shawn's reaction. Shawn finally closed the notebook and asked how a 12-year-old could know such things. Jun smiled and said he was just smart. Shawn shook his head, saying no one would believe this came from a child. Even top university students didn't think this far ahead. Jun replied calmly that those students weren't grandchildren of a chaebol chairman, nor did they dream as big as he did. He explained that he had spent years listening to his grandfather, learning from every conversation. Shawn asked if Jun's grandfather had helped with the plan. Jun smiled vaguely and said he had simply listened closely. Shawn went outside to speak with Jun's father. Staring into space, he admitted that Jun was no ordinary child. This wasn't about good grades. The boy thought differently, sharper, deeper. His father smiled quietly. Shawn fell silent, gripping his suitcase, realizing he needed time to think. The game had just reached another level. Yoongi reached out, trying to stop Shawn, but watched him leave anyway. He froze in place, eyebrows raised, still processing Shawn's words about Jun being a genius. The problem was, he didn't even know what Jun was a genius at. From inside the house, Jun watched through the window. The moment his father looked up, Jun smiled brightly and waved. Yoongi frowned, a bead of sweat forming on his face. It was already night, yet the second-floor window glowed with light. Shawn paused and asked Jun directly whether he had used information from his grandfather to create the investment plan. Jun turned toward him and with an innocent expression answered yes. Sitting on a child's computer chair, he let silence fill the room. Shawn closed his eyes, nodded, and said that a plan backed by the Saying Group chairman's perspective would naturally be valuable. Standing up, the wooden floor creaked. Shawn adjusted the documents in his hands and said bluntly that Jun wouldn't need any investment textbooks. Jun knew he had no choice. Using his grandfather as an excuse was the only way to force his father's friend to follow the plan. Shawn packed the papers into his briefcase and said that by the end of the year, an investment company in America could be established. Jun would own it entirely, keep his savings overseas, and part of the funds would cover operating costs. Jun replied calmly that those details could be handled without Shawn's involvement, then added that he had one more request. Shawn smiled nervously and asked what surprise was coming next. Jun grinned. Downstairs, footsteps creaked as Shawn descended. Yoongi stood up from the couch and asked if Jun had caused trouble. Shawn placed a heavy hand on his shoulder and said, with narrowed eyes, that he was jealous of his friend's son. Yoongi slumped onto the sofa in relief and asked why. Shawn explained that Jun planned to invest only 10 billion won. Confused, Yoongi asked what Jun would do with the remaining 4 billion. Shawn leaned forward and said the boy wanted to start a film production company. Yoongi froze. Shawn added casually that Jun had already chosen his father as the first CEO candidate. Yoongi jumped back in shock. Shawn smiled, explaining that with 4 billion won, at least 10 Korean films could be produced. Yoongi pressed his lips together, thinking, if he invested personally as well, the profits could multiply. Shawn noted that Jun was frighteningly perceptive. He asked him to lead the company knowing Yoongi would never accept direct money. It was psychological judo. Yoongi lowered his gaze, silent. The next day at the chairman's residence, the secretary explained that Shawn was the chairman of PowerShares Korea. Yang Cheol frowned, surprised that his son knew someone like that. Haki calmly added that they had studied together in England. Yang Cheol scoffed, saying Jun should have simply put the money in the bank for interest. Instead, he chose to start an investment company. Shawn's profile lay on the desk. Yang Cheol dismissed him as a fly attracted to his grandson's money, but once alone, he leaned back and smiled. Jun was exactly like him, dissatisfied with percentages, always hungry for more. On November 3, 1989, Jun arrived in Manhattan. Skyscrapers reflected sunlight like a movie opening shot. Shawn called the building slightly shabby. Jun thought it looked like a palace. Inside, a sign read Fantasy Investment Inc. Shawn thought the name childish. Jun thought it was destiny. Employees gathered. Jun was introduced as CEO. They stared, stunned. Jun spoke fluent English. Shawn was baffled. Jun explained that learning foreign languages was mandatory to survive at Saying. In his past life, it had been non-negotiable. Jun immediately asked the staff to investigate a company. Martin Bell. Shawn's eyes widened. Employees whispered, confused, thinking he meant a computer brand. Jun explained calmly. At age 12, Martin sold stamps directly, bypassing auction fees. He used targeted marketing, simplified distribution, and later founded a world-class computer company. Shawn stared. How did a child know this? Jun smiled. Martin had earned money at 12 without a rich grandfather. Wasn't it obvious he'd become enormous? Shawn ordered immediate research. Days later, they met at a burger joint. Shawn explained they were late. Martin Computer already had $30 million in funding. Timing mattered. Inside the crowded restaurant, Jun spotted a man with glasses. Shawn confirmed it. Martin Bell, 27 years old, one of the richest men alive. They sat down. Martin said he had 15 minutes. Shawn introduced fantasy investment. Martin said he didn't need funding. Jun watched quietly. Then he spoke. He said Martin's past was Jun's present. Martin squinted. Jun explained that Martin had $2,000 at age 12. Jun already had 15 million. Martin froze. Jun declared he wanted to become a major shareholder once the company went public next year. Martin's expression changed instantly. Jun added he would buy all available shares and join the board, transferring voting rights back to Martin until resale, with a buyback option at market price. The table went silent. Martin studied the boy. Finally, he laughed. He asked the child's name. Jun smiled. Howard. Later in the car, Shawn admitted he still couldn't process what he'd seen. Jun calmly said the truth. He was a 40-year-old man reborn with future knowledge. Shawn stared, then crossed his arms, dismissing it as science fiction. Jun laughed. Shawn sighed and looked out the window. People understood the past and future at different ages. There was no reason to doubt the mind of someone who had already lived it. The boy smiled as the plane began its descent, the runway lights stretching beneath them. Reports from the New York branch claimed the trip was just sightseeing and shopping, but holding a folder in his hands, Yang Chial scoffed. His grandson didn't travel with Shawn for leisure. This was business. The secretary bowed and promised to investigate further. Noticing his hesitation, Yang Chial asked why he looked so tense. Haki clenched his fists and revealed that Yoongi was currently creating a film production company. The chairman froze in surprise. According to the report, the plan was nearly complete. Filming would begin next year, and Yoongi was attempting to manage 2 projects at once. The folder slipped from Yang Chial's hand. Grinding his teeth, he demanded to know whether Yoongi was using his son's money. Haki confirmed it. 4 billion won. The old man slammed the table, crossing his arms in anger. He snapped that his grandson had made a mistake by gaining recognition but failing to spend money properly. Even if the money belonged to Jun, it should not be wasted so carelessly. Haki cautiously objected, saying the film project could succeed. Yang Chial shot him a deadly look and replied that Yoongi had lived his entire life like a slacker. Making movies was not easy. If it were, there wouldn't be so many box office disasters. Still, Haki added that if even one film succeeded, it would prove Jun's investment instincts were terrifyingly accurate. Late that night, lights glowed in the cottage windows. Investment reports covered the table. Jun had invested around $9 million into Martin Computer and was reviewing candidates for the remaining $6 million. As he flipped through documents, one name caught his eye. Microsoft. Shawn smiled and said the tech field was risky. Jun frowned. How could Bill Gates' company be dangerous? Shawn explained that Microsoft's operating systems weren't receiving strong market reactions, and rumors suggested IBM might develop its own system and cut ties. Jun thought briefly about future versions of DOS and decided it didn't matter. A year or two wouldn't change the outcome. Shawn admitted that if it were him, he would still choose Microsoft. Jun agreed calmly. Sometimes, betting on the future meant trusting inevitability. Jun then asked Shawn to sell the remaining land. Shawn was confused. Why sell before prices peaked? Jun explained that fantasy investment needed additional capital. If $15 million went into major companies, they needed liquidity to keep playing the game. Shawn finally understood and slapped his knee. Half the proceeds would be reinvested, the rest held in reserve. After Shawn left, Jun leaned back, legs crossed, staring at the ceiling. His knowledge of the future was incomplete. He wasn't a Wall Street trader. He had never stood on the exchange floor. His memory came from scattered articles and headlines. But he had one unbeatable weapon: movies. In his mind, the massive Hollywood sign appeared. He remembered blockbusters, box office kings, and studios that printed money like the MCU in its prime. Film alone could carry his empire for decades. A few days later, Shawn returned with a thick folder labeled Hollywood Film Production Investments. Jun smiled. When asked if this was to prove something to his father, Jun answered without hesitation. Yes. As Jun scanned the list, one title annoyed him. Phantom Romance had already been released, but another caught his attention. A small family film still in production. The lead actor was a child. Shawn dismissed it immediately, saying the budget had ballooned and production was shaky. The film had been transferred between studios and was stalled. Jun's eyes widened. He ordered them to invest, immediately, as much as possible. Shawn snapped back, furious. Film investment wasn't like stocks. If stocks crashed, losses were controlled. A failed movie burned money with no exit. This wasn't investing. It was gambling. He flatly refused. Jun didn't look away. He said quietly that this would be the only time. In the future, he would stay silent on investments. Then he reminded Shawn of something simple. Fantasy investment could afford to lose everything. After all, the richest man in Korea was his grandfather. Shawn's veins bulged, then he exhaled slowly. Fine. Jun added one condition: secure exclusive Korean distribution rights. Shawn agreed. That was easy. They were the only investors. Shawn left in a foul mood. Jun's mother watched him go, worried, but Jun smiled and said there was nothing to fear. Shawn's anger would vanish the moment he saw the box office numbers. In Jun's hands was a single document: Home Alone. Time fast-forwarded. Microsoft released DOS 3, exploded into the PC market, and its stock surged. Martin computer shares skyrocketed. Shawn went from furious to euphoric. The $8 million invested in Home Alone was already paying off beyond expectations. Then the film premiered. Kevin screamed, traps snapped, the world laughed. Home Alone earned over 30 billion won in the US alone. Global release would push it even higher. Shawn joked that Jun might become the richest underclassman on the planet. Jun smiled calmly. He was already preparing for high school. Yoongi stormed in, complaining about his schedule. Shawn asked whether Yoongi's film could even find theater space. Yoongi admitted the truth. Every theater was waiting for Home Alone. Any competing film would be forgotten overnight. Shawn grinned. He handed Yoongi a document: full Korean distribution rights. Jun explained the plan. Only theaters that screened his father's film during the holidays would receive Home Alone. New Year's Eve was the perfect choke point. Yoongi stared at the paper, stunned, then rushed out to execute the deal. Shawn laughed. His friend hadn't even asked where the documents came from. Jun then asked Shawn to prepare a list of all films releasing that year. He planned to invest the $200 million fantasy investment had earned. Shawn broke into a sweat. The return rate for employees was already 22%. Jun calculated quickly. 6 cycles a year meant 600% returns at minimum. Shawn promised to prepare everything. Jun collapsed onto the bed, exhausted but satisfied. For the next 3 years, he would focus on school. Maintaining top grades was the price of his grandfather's trust. A knock came at the door. His mother peeked in and suggested dinner. Jun smiled and agreed. Downstairs, Yoongi rushed out, checking his watch. He said the film released today and he wanted to see it with his own eyes. Jun watched his father leave and smiled. The future wasn't coming anymore. After that, Jun opened a printed newspaper. He flipped to the middle and began reading casually when something suddenly caught his attention. He lowered the paper onto the coffee table. Every newspaper carried articles criticizing Ain Motors. Jun covered his mouth thoughtfully. This wasn't supposed to happen yet. In his memory, Ain Motors didn't truly collapse until after the 1997 financial crisis, and even then, it was absorbed by Diane Motors a year later. Rolling his eyes slightly, Jun considered two possibilities. Either the future had already changed because of him, or this was a one-time public criticism, part of the government's attempt to rein in large corporations. Turning his head, he called out to his mother in the kitchen. Without standing up, she answered. Jun asked when they would visit his grandfather. She replied that they would go tomorrow. Jun asked if he could go alone earlier. Smiling, she said he could go after breakfast and that his grandfather would like it. Watching her set the plates on the table, Jun asked if she would go to the cinema since today was the premiere. His mother replied that if there were no spectators, she would feel very nervous. Jun couldn't reassure her. The truth was, he remembered almost nothing about this film. Maybe it never even existed in the original timeline. Either way, he had already given his father a chance. What happened next depended on him alone. The next day, Jun stood quietly outside under the bright sun, simply watching. The chairman's residence glowed in the light. An elderly housekeeper told him his grandfather was in the office with guests. Jun said he would wait in the living room. He noticed two pairs of men's shoes in the hallway. Sitting on the large leather sofa, Jun couldn't stop thinking about the newspaper articles and the early morning meeting upstairs. He pressed his hands to his mouth, eyes focused forward. In his mind, he imagined the conversation unfolding. Yang Chial sat behind his desk, asking whether Yoongi was confident he could take over Ain Motors. Yoongi confirmed it. Acquiring Ain would secure second place in the industry, and if successful, Sang would become #1 in the country. Yang Chial entrusted the task to the vice chairman and ordered him to coordinate with Chairman Lee, demanding Ain be taken within a year. He promised to hand over the entire automobile industry if he succeeded. The men present widened their eyes in shock. Yoongi smiled brightly. The secretary stiffened. Giving away the automobile industry was nearly equivalent to handing over the entire conglomerate. He suspected the chairman had already chosen a successor. But Yang Chial clarified calmly. He wasn't giving away all of Sang, only the automobile sector. Transferring those shares wouldn't threaten control, and even that alone would generate massive personal wealth. He smirked, saying Yoongi probably thought the same. When the meeting ended, Jun entered the office. He asked if his grandfather worked even on holidays. Yang Chial replied that he had already finished. Jun's eyes landed on a newspaper headline on the desk. Lazy management of ownerless companies exposes structural weakness in large corporations. Jun's eyes sparkled. Today's meeting really had been about Ain Motors. He casually mentioned that his uncle seemed unusually cheerful. Yang Chial brushed it off as holiday mood. Then Jun pointed at a folder on the desk. The title read, Restructuring the Domestic Automobile Industry and Government Support Measures. Jun froze. Suddenly, everything clicked. He asked why there was such noise about Ain Motors in the media today. Yang Chial smiled and asked what was strange about it. Jun replied that whenever Sang appeared in newspapers, his grandfather usually became furious and demanded to know who leaked it. Yang Chial laughed softly and explained that newspapers don't sell truth. They sell justifications. Traffic jams justify road construction. Urban complaints justify redevelopment. Jun listened, stunned. Then he asked the key question. who benefited from the articles about Ain Motors. Yang Qiao answered calmly, a competitor who wanted to weaken Ain. Jun's eyes widened. Did that mean Diane Motors or Sang itself? Yang Qiao smiled and gently stroked Jun's head. Jun's heart pounded. In his original timeline, Diane Motors absorbed Ain, not Sang. That meant his grandfather had failed back then. Now history was already shifting. At lunch, the entire family gathered. Plates filled the table. Relatives watched quietly as Yang Qiao suddenly asked his second daughter, not Jun's mother, to bring soup. The room froze. His mother watched in shock. The hierarchy had changed. Jun smiled faintly. His grandfather had acknowledged his parents in front of everyone. Later, Jun sneaked back into the office. He searched the documents on the desk, spreading them across the floor. His expression darkened. This wasn't a takeover plan. It was a government-backed consolidation policy. If Diane absorbed Ain, monopoly concerns would arise. That made Sang the only acceptable buyer. Jun clenched his fists. His grandfather was planning to manipulate policy itself. Footsteps echoed. Yang Qiao stood behind him. Jun froze. One wrong word could destroy years of trust. Choosing carefully, Jun told the truth, slightly bent. He said he had read the newspaper, noticed the folder, and became curious. He apologized for touching the documents. Yang Qiao stared at him for a long moment. Then he smiled. He praised Jun's curiosity and perseverance, but warned him never to enter the office alone again. The crisis passed, but Jun knew the real problem remained. Leaving the office, Jun clenched his fists. If Sang absorbed Ain, his future plans would collapse. He needed to stop the government itself from supporting this consolidation. Later, reports came in. The chairman of the Hami group had purchased land in advance. Politicians had accepted bribes. Yang Qiao grimaced. The secretary advised staying away from the Blue House. This fire would be difficult to control. Yang Qiao slammed the folder shut. They would give up Ain Motors. The report was thrown into the trash. That night, Jun sat in his chair, sipping juice through a straw, legs crossed. He knew chaos wouldn't come immediately, but the anonymous information he had leaked would slowly spread. Sooner or later, the public would notice. And when they did, the future would shift once again. Dunn placed the bottle of juice on the table, his fingers tightening around it. That would be enough. With political circles shaken for a while longer, the government would have no choice but to reject Sang's proposal. They simply wouldn't have the time or stability to deal with anything else. Sunlight poured through the panoramic windows of towering skyscrapers. Sitting across from him on the sofa, Shawn looked up from his documents when Dunn spoke. The boy suggested that Shawn leave power shares and fully join fantasy investment. After all, Shawn already owned 2% of the company, and the money he earned here would allow his salary to grow far beyond what he had now. Without lifting his eyes from the paperwork, Shawn replied that he had no intention of going anywhere. Dunn widened his eyes in surprise and asked why. Shawn calmly answered that his boss owned 98% of the shares and made investment decisions that were consistently successful. There was barely any work left for anyone else. Looking up, he asked if that wasn't true. A bead of sweat rolled down Dunn's temple. It shouldn't be like this. He needed a different approach. Clutching his knees, Dunn proposed creating a Korean branch to transfer part of the funds and manage them domestically. He casually mentioned that his grandfather also had a secret fund. Shawn's pen froze. Dunn realized that during recent inquiries into who managed his money, his grandfather had concluded that Shawn was capable enough to handle that fund. Shawn frowned in displeasure. This wasn't information a child should know. Dunn explained calmly that he would only withdraw the money he personally invested in Martin Computer. Shawn could manage his grandfather's fund and the remaining assets. Shawn frowned deeply. and asked if Dunn was really planning to pull money out of Martin Computer. Dunn nodded. He planned to do it early next year. Shawn jumped to his feet, anger flashing across his face. Martin was a golden goose, smashing income ceilings every single day. The stock had never fallen since going public. Selling it made no sense. Leaning back into the sofa, Dunn closed his eyes and said they would talk about it later. Then he asked Shawn what he thought about the Korean branch idea. Smiling faintly, Dunn clarified that this wasn't a proposal. It was a request. Shawn narrowed his eyes and turned toward the window. The anger didn't leave his face, but after a long silence he said they would talk after he finished his work. Dunn smiled. He was ready to accept any conditions. Shawn moved toward his desk. Dunn knew he needed an adult who wouldn't treat him like a child, someone smart and experienced. Until he became an adult himself, only Shawn could fill that role. Shawn turned back and asked what Dunn planned to do with the money from Martin Computer. Dunn casually replied that he wanted to invest in Japan. Shawn nearly exploded. He slammed his foot down and sat heavily in the chair, snapping that newspapers were already screaming about the bubble bursting and Japan entering its greatest economic crisis. Dunn calmly replied that the greatest opportunities always appear during the greatest crises. Shawn crossed his legs and scoffed. Only successful people say that. Everyone else dies trying. Dunn smiled and asked quietly if Shawn thought he couldn't be that one in a million. Shawn stared at him suspiciously. Dunn's smile felt unsettling. Elsewhere, morning sunlight rose over another skyscraper. Yoongi sat at his desk asking his children how their meeting with their grandfather had gone. Yonan crossed his arms and replied that their grandfather advised them to go to Europe and stay there until they were 30. Yoongi frowned and asked if Yonan had lost his temper. Yonan replied that he smiled, said he would try harder and left. Yoongi leaned back and praised his restraint, but he warned them that now their grandfather would watch their every move. Any rumors could affect not just them, but everyone around them. The siblings exchanged irritated looks. Then Yoongi announced that once his daughter graduated next year, he would arrange her marriage immediately. She protested sharply, saying no one got married right after university anymore. Yoongi silenced her. All they had done in life was be born with their grandfather's blood. If that favor disappeared, none of them would enjoy life anymore. Yonan looked away, irritated. Yoongi explained that their grandfather's favor had shifted. It was now focused on the youngest child. The room fell silent. Information had reached Yoongi that his father had personally watched the film Dunn's family produced. Everyone was stunned. Yoongi told them to behave, visit their grandfather often, and not cause trouble. When the Sang group eventually fell into his hands, they would be free to live as they wished. After they left, Yoongi removed his glasses and pinched the bridge of his nose. Ain Motors should have been his. Since then, too many problems had been resolved directly by the chairman without his involvement. Rumors spread through the conglomerate. Branch presidents argued. Authority shifted. Yoongi clenched his fist. The child who was never considered a threat was now turning everything upside down. Meanwhile, Fantasy Investment officially established its Korean branch. Shawn became the representative in both the US and Korea. Their relationship subtly changed. Shawn stopped openly objecting and began listening more carefully. Shawn questioned whether selling all Martin Computer shares at once was wise. Dunn replied calmly that they had already made 100-fold profit. There was no reason to be greedy. Shawn sighed, arguing was pointless. Documents spilled across the table. Shawn admitted he was struggling to find the next investment target. Dunn scanned the pages until one word caught his eye. Power banks. He smiled. Its founder was a third-generation Japanese Korean. It didn't even plan to go public. Dunn smiled wider. That meant opportunity. His grandfather's words echoed in his mind. Everything has a price. Shawn asked how much Dunn wanted to offer. Dunn answered casually, "Start at 10 times, go up to 50. Shawn nearly dropped the documents. Dunn reminded him that Martin had already grown 100 times. Power banks could do the same. Shawn warned him it was a gamble. Dunn replied calmly that you can't play poker alone. Eventually, Shawn agreed to push the deal. Days later, Shawn returned with news. He had secured the shares at 35 times the price. Now all they could do was trust Dunn's luck. Dunn smiled and said everything would be fine. He pierced the lid of his yogurt with a straw and told Shawn to sell Martin shares, buy power banks, and keep the rest for himself. Next year, Dunn would enter high school and focus entirely on academics. Shawn laughed, saying it was the first time he'd heard a student talk about studying so awkwardly. Dunn smiled and said he wanted to study law. Shawn froze. Dunn explained calmly. His grandfather was the best entrepreneur in Korea. His uncle studied economics abroad. There was nothing new for him there. Law was different. He wanted to prove something. That even a third-generation chaebol could earn admission through pure academic ability. That evening, Dunn sat with his grandfather, drinking tea. When Dunn said he planned to attend a regular Korean school, his grandfather frowned and immediately proposed sending him to Switzerland. Dunn smiled and said he planned to attend the University of Seoul, specifically the law faculty. Yang Chiao was displeased. Dunn explained gently that law school demanded the highest scores, no shortcuts, no dirty tricks. Society would be forced to recognize true ability. Memories flashing through his mind of other businessmen boasting about their grandchildren. This was different. Looking at Dunn, Yang Chiao smiled and said that no one in his life had ever made him happier than his youngest grandson. When Dunn enrolled in law school, he could ask for any gift he wanted. Dunn smiled softly. This time the gift wouldn't be a car. It would be power. Jun pictured Yao standing in front of the company building. In July 1994, Power Bank shares officially went public at 18,900 yen per share, the highest price at listing. The chairman appeared in a black suit on opening day, and the company's market capitalization instantly exploded past 200 billion yen. Jun watched green numbers pile up. His investment of $230 million turned into $850 million, netting him $620 million in just 1 year. Before the bubble burst, Jun sold every single share. For the next 3 years of high school, he disappeared from the market completely and focused on studying. Occasionally, he invested in Hollywood films purely as a hobby, projects like Love on the Titanic directed by James Cameron, treating movies the way billionaires treat golf. Sangin graduated from high school without incident and left for America to study, lacking the credits to enter a top domestic university. At the airport, departure boards flashed overhead as his brother waved goodbye. Jun watched calmly. From the very beginning, no expectations had ever been placed on Sangin, which ironically gave him freedom to pursue what he truly wanted. As the plane climbed through the blue sky, Jun stared out the window. Now all eyes were on him, the only third-generation heir still standing in the spotlight of the Sang group. He wondered what would happen once he entered Seoul University. Some people watched his grades with admiration, others with fear. Only his parents and grandfather watched him with hope. The day before entrance exam results were announced, Yao sat in his office on the phone, smiling. His youngest grandson ranked 39th nationwide. Among humanities students alone, Jun ranked 10th out of 400, scoring 367 out of 400. Only 6 points separated him from first place. The gap was so small it felt like bad RNG rather than lack of ability. When Yao received the results, He proudly told everyone that Jun would study law at Seoul University, even though those scores were strong enough for Harvard or Oxford. Scholarships, he said, should go to students who need them. Their family could pay full tuition easily, but Jun was simply too talented to refuse recognition. The mansion glowed under the setting sun as Yao handed the PR manager the results and ordered him to leak the information. He explained calmly that money and influence can't buy exam scores. The public needed to know this was real ability. Curious what happens next? Tap that cheeky bell, subscribe, like, and share.